Good afternoon and welcome to today's talk where we're going to be showing you how you can implement a Azure data solution on top of Microsoft Dataverse. So we're really pleased to be able to be here today to present this talk to you. We wouldn't be here without the very kind sponsors who have donated and given their support behind this event. So be sure to find out more about them after the talk today. And again, a big thank you to them for supporting us in what we're doing here today. So introductions, first of all. So my name's Joe. I'm a director and principal consultant at Solar Cloud Solutions. We're a sort of small gold partner based in the UK. I do a lot of work these days across both the Power Platform and Azure, part of the reason why I was speaking today. And I also quite like hoarding various different badges as well. So if it's shiny and it's a badge and it's Microsoft giving it out, then chances are I've probably got it as well. Also with me today is Mark Carrington, so I'll just hand over to Mark so he can introduce himself.
Hi, yes, thanks. So yeah, I'm Mark Carrington. I'm the Chief Technologist and Director at Data8. We're data quality specialists based in the UK and do a lot of work around the whole Dynamics Power Platform area. Again, I'm also an active blogger and produce a number of tools for the XRM Toolbox, which you can check out from those links there. And if you ever come around to my house, you'll find it stuffed full of Lego. So yeah, just be careful.
Great stuff. Thanks a lot then, Mark. Okay, so our agenda today then, we're just going to first of all set the scenes in terms of, okay, the challenge that we've got in our cloud first world today. There's so much different data we have to consume. What are the challenges around that? And also, I guess, what are the opportunities as well? We'll then look at how Microsoft Dataverse or Dynamics 365 Online customer engagement fits into this overall, and then provide you with a bit of an overview in terms of what you've got today in Azure that's going to help you build out a really comprehensive and robust data solution. Now, the best way to sort of look at all of this stuff is actually see it in action. So we've got a demo today where we can show you an end-to-end scenario that hopefully demonstrates all of this in practice, and then we'll finally sort of wrap up and sort of look at what else is available as well, and also give you some details about how you can actually take the demo that we built today and actually play about with it yourself in your own environment. Okay, so it's probably correct to say these days we are in the age of abundance when it comes to data. We're no longer in a case where we've got 3.5 meg floppy inch disks to store data. We're not in a constraint scenario. We can literally have terabytes, if not petabytes of data. And really, we've got some challenges that emerge as part of that. First of all is around process. Okay, how can we make sure that we've got the correct process in place to store, interpret, aggregate, generate analytical information from our data? How can we do that in a really comprehensive way that it leverages what we've got in our cloud systems that we're working today, but also if there's a need as well, take data that we've got in our on-premise systems and get some benefit from that as well. These days, across organizations and businesses, there's lots of consumers of data. We need to make sure that we're giving individuals or teams the right information they need. How can we sort of get that information to them in an effective way? How can we manage the pure variety of data that's coming in these days? We're no longer in a situation where we're just working with purely structured data sources. It could be semi-structured, non-structured. We could be working with media files or an abundance of different types of files. So we need some way of being able to sort of contend with that and be able to work with them effectively. And finally as well, we need to decide, okay, well, where are we going to be pinning our hopes on in terms of our technology vendors? We've got lots of different vendors available these days. We've got Amazon, Oracle, Microsoft, of course. Who do we want to go with, and who offers the most compelling set of tools that's going to help us with these challenges that we talk about? And ultimately, a lot of this, if you're just coming from a background where you are concerned purely with, let's say, your Dynamics 365 customer engagement system, or you've got a fairly specific use case around Microsoft Dataverse, which is the low-code database platform within the Power Platform, you may be asking yourself, okay, well, why would you need to consider Azure alongside that? Well, really, as your solution grows over time, you're going to be sitting on more and more data, gigabytes potentially of data that could be of potential use to you, and really what you've got there is potentially a gold mine. all you need potentially to start getting some really good insights of that is to sort of start thinking about how you can use Azure alongside your Dataverse deployment. Licensing is a major consideration, particularly when it comes to Power Platform business applications these days. Whereas before there were perhaps more generous sort of allowances in place for data storage and stuff like that. Now it's actually becoming more expedient for us to look at getting data out of the Dataverse once it's sort of past its sell-by date or sort of useful life, get it out into somewhere where the business can still work and interact with it, but we're not paying as much for it potentially. So therefore, when we put Azure into the equation, we can start to hopefully introduce some cost efficiencies around that. And really, when we consider in terms of, okay, Dynamics 365 customer engagement, or even let's say a small Dataverse deployment to maybe target a specific department or area of the business, this is just one plank within the organization. What we want to be doing with all of our data sources is we want to be able to get this combined, with other useful complementary sources so that we can enhance the data and ultimately get more benefit out of it as well. And finally as well, when we look at, okay, what we've got, it's actually really easy to get our data out into Azure. It's not going to cost you an arm and a leg. You're not going to have to look at a complex integration. You've got tools such as Data Lake Export, Azure Data Export Service. You've now also got the ability, as a SQL developer, we can now actually connect up to our Dataverse, execute transact SQL queries against that, and work with it as if it was a proper SQL database. So really, there's no excuse. We at least owe it to ourselves to at least try and explore what we can do when we get Azure into the mix. And there's such a breadth of technologies available that regardless of the type of scenario that you're looking at, there's going to be a solution that you can sort of take off the shelf and start to use. So as an example on the slide on here, storage accounts. So if you need the ability to be able to have temporary storage for, let's say, CSV or text files to process those, storage accounts give you a really scalable and secure means of storing that. You've got things such as Azure Data Factory, which you can use as a sort of replacement for your traditional SQL Server integration services packages. The great thing about Data Factory in particular is that it's a modern tool. It integrates really nicely with things like Azure DevOps and obviously automating your deployments and things like that. And then moving beyond that, you can start to introduce complementary services around that. So whether it's a dedicated data warehouse solution via Azure Synapse Analytics, a big data processing platform such as Azure Databricks, or if you need to start looking at tools, let's say to start classifying and introducing governance around your data sources, you've got tools like Azure Purview at your disposal there. So a lot of really great technologies here, which I think certainly sets Microsoft out amongst the competition when it comes to other cloud providers. So really what we want to do now is, okay, we can talk about this all day, but we want to actually show you it in action. So we've got a demo here. We're going to show you basically sort of a cradle to grave type scenario, how you can basically start off with your data in Microsoft Dataverse, get that out into Azure, use Data Factory sort of as the glue to sort of process this, complement it using data from the company's house API, and ultimately surface this out into a format where people can consume it easily using Power BI, which is an absolutely great tool when it comes to consuming data like this. So the diagram here sort of outlines at a high level in terms of how that process would sort of look. We're going to first of all look at getting the data out into Azure using something called Data Lake Export Service. Data Factory will then be used to do most of the processing. We'll be able to bring in tools like Azure Databricks as part of this, transform and enhance the data, get it out into Synapse Analytics, and then finally consume it via our Power BI report dashboard that we built out. So without further ado, let's jump in and see all this in action.
So yes, as Joe was saying, we're assuming our starting point is Dynamics 365 customer engagement, and for simplicity, for the point of this demo, we're going to look at just the sort of standard account entity. So I've got a few thousand accounts in a test system here, and you see for each one I've got a name, and we've also got the company's house number associated with those as well, and also how much each one's spent with us. And what we're going to try and have a look at is, can we analyze who are our good spenders, how could we go out and find more people like that to try and grow our business? But at the moment, all we've got is who's already spending with us. So thankfully in the UK, we've got a wealth of company information provided by Companies House. So what we're going to try and do here is try and take the data that we've already got in Dynamics, take the data from Companies House, bring the two together and see if we can do some analysis on it to try and predict who we should be targeting next to try and grow the business. So as Joe said, there's an awful lot of tools out there that we want to move our data into. And they all need to be able to talk to each other. They need to be able to share data. And Azure Data Lake is going to provide that sort of central repository where we're going to put this data in so that other tools can get it back out again. Now, a data lake might sound a little bit scary. It might sound a bit expensive. It's really just a file storage. It's based on the regular storage account technology that's been around in Azure since the day Azure was created. It's one of the real building blocks of the Azure platform. But it's just got one extra option enabled when you create it, which is called this hierarchical namespaces option. If you tick that, instead of having a regular storage account, you've got the data lake storage account. It's really nothing more than a place you can dump files. So how you can go and set this up, if I go and have a look at the Power Apps Maker portal, down the left-hand side here, there's an export to data lake option. And all you do here is you select a data lake storage account that you've already gone and created, and you choose which tables you want to export to it. And it just magically happens. There is no more configuration to do. It's all very quick and easy. It's kept up to date and in sync. Every few minutes, any new accounts that you create will be pushed into the data lake. It is kind of an all or nothing thing, so you can't pick and choose which columns you want, you can't pick and choose which rows you want. You get a full dump of everything in each table that you select, which makes it nice and easy, but also means that you might end up with an awful lot of extra columns and extra data in the data lake version of your data that you might not actually want. So we might need to do a little bit of extra processing then to sort of pick out the bits that we do want and throw away the extra bits that aren't useful to us in our scenario. So our next bit is then going to be taking this data forwards and combining it with that Companies House data. So once this export to data lake is run, you can see here that data being exported to this this container within the data lake. So we end up with a folder for each entity type. So we've got accounts and contacts in this case. And we can drill into this and you can see you've got files for each year's worth of data, extra little snapshots. You don't want to be dealing with this data directly. There's CSV files here, there's some JSON files. It's not something you should be accessing the files individually directly. And we'll have a look in a minute how we go and access those files in a nicer sort of way. So as well as this data coming from Dynamics, I've also got a regular not data lake storage account where we've just dumped a data file that we've downloaded from the Companies House website. So this has got all the company details available as of the start of November. And I want to try and join these two together. So what I'm going to use next is the Azure Data Factory. So in here, I've got a data flow, which is going to load in my CDS accounts, my Dataverse accounts. And all I do here is point that towards the Azure Data Lake storage account. I've told it that it's stored in this common data model format, which is what the export to data lake service produces. I've given it a few options here to say that it's the account entity that I want to load from that file. And you can see here it's automatically picked up all the column names and the column types that are part of that account entity. Now I mentioned that you can't pick and choose which ones you want, so there's about 250 columns there, I think, as a default for the account entity. And I've done a similar thing to load in the CSV file from Companies House. So again, just point it towards the data set that's in the blob storage account, and again pick up all those column names. Now, one thing I want to do when I'm trying to analyze this data to decide who I should be targeting next, I've got a feeling that it should be something about industry code. We're a high-tech company, we sell to other technology companies. It's kind of unlikely that maybe a fast food restaurant or something is going to buy one of our products. So I want to do a little bit of analysis around the SIC codes. Now, the company's house data gives us the full detailed SIC codes. And the great thing about SIC codes is they're hierarchical. So you get a 5-digit SIC code that identifies a very particular line of business. If you take off the last digit of that, you get a more generic one, and you take off another digit and another digit to get slowly more generic groupings of businesses. So I can put in here some derived columns. So I've started off with a 5-digit zip code. I can take the leftmost 4 digits, leftmost 3 digits, leftmost 2 digits to get more generic industry classifications as well for each of the companies in Companies House. So now I've got that, I need to join the two together. So thankfully, I've got a nice, easy to use identifier in my Dynamics data, which is the Companies House number. So I can just join the two together. In this case, I want to take every company from Companies House and then append on the details from Dynamics where I've got a match. Now from there, I want to do two things. So firstly, I want to just output the entire result set. And that's going to go out to another data set within the data lake so that more of these other tools can then go and process this further. The second thing I want to do is just produce a quick view of it. So I want to do a quick sanity check that this data has been processed correctly, that I've got the sorts of numbers of data that I would expect to see. And that's kind of hard to do when I've got a data set of 10 million companies and 250 columns. I don't want to be going to open this data directly. So instead I can do some quick aggregation here as well. So in this case, I'm just going to count the for each SIC code, I'm just going to count the number of companies that match it and the total revenue that I gain from that SIC code. And then I'm going to put that out to a separate CSV file. So I can run that from a pipeline over here. I can start that running. And what that's going to come out with is, this is my full output. You see it's split the results here over multiple CSV files because it's several gigabytes worth of data. And it's also put this aggregation version in here. So I can take a quick look at that. I'll click the right place. So you can see here that I've got the details of the SIC codes, what revenue I've got from it from my Dynamics data, and the number of records I've got in each of those. So if I maybe sort that by the number that I've got here, you can see here I've got most accounts in information technology type records, which is kind of what I expect because we're a high-tech business. So this is looking like it's about right. I can do a quick sanity check here to say I've got 10,000 accounts. That's correct. And I've got total revenue of 3.3 million. So if I'm happy that that data flow is correct, I can move on to start using the full data set elsewhere. So mentioned this is all written out here to all these different CSV files. So this is back in the data lake again, so I can go and use this in some more tools now. So the next thing is, well, how can I take a look at the data that I've got and try and make some predictions about what could happen? So can I apply some machine learning techniques to this? So this is where another tool called Azure Databricks can come in handy. So this is a very scalable service. You can work with some absolutely massive data sets with this. it is much more technical than some of the other ones. It's not point and click. You do end up having to write code. You write it in this workbook format, so you can do it a little bit at a time. You can do some nice displays and analysis of the data as you go to make sure you're getting it right each time. And because it's all written as code, you can just rerun it each time you need to repeat your data. Repeat the process on new data sets. So what we've got here is this is now read in those CSV files from my data lake, and I can quickly display that as a nice grid format to make sure that it all looks correct. So now I just want to do a little bit of filtering. I want to get down those columns to just a few. So here I can make sure that this is the company name from Company's House. This is the company name from Dynamics. So I can check that those two do match and that that join on the account number has worked correctly. So now to be able to do some sort of prediction, I need to make sure, first of all, I've got some detailed data to work with. So I want to be able to predict, in this case, what the revenue might be based on the SIC code. I've got some thought that there might be some relationship there that's worth investigating. So first of all, I want to filter my data down to where I've got some revenue and where I've got a SIC code. Where either of them are blank, then I can't really use that data to make a useful prediction. So I can filter that data down. And then next I want to be able to put into the machine learning algorithm whether I think an account is a good account or a bad account. That's ultimately what I want to be able to get to be able to say, of the ones that aren't my customers at the moment, should I try and go after them or not? So in this case, I'm going to classify anything that's got over a £10,000 annual revenue as being a good account, anything else as a bad account. So I can add that on as an extra calculated field actually within Databricks. And then finally, I can just count those. So in this case, I've got just under 5,000 records still left for me to work with here. Then a key part of doing machine learning is that I need to have my data set split into two parts. There's the part that I'm going to use to train the algorithm with, and then there's the leftover part that I'm going to test it with. So these are records where I already know whether they're good or bad, but I haven't used them for training. So I can put them through the algorithm and see whether the algorithm gave me the expected answer or not to see how well it's working. So in this case, I'm splitting it. I'm going to use 80% of the data for my training and 20% for my testing. So again, I'm just going to have a quick check here to have a look at the training data set. So have I got this this calculation right? So you can see here all these revenues less than 10,000, and my label, is it good or not, is 0, saying these are bad accounts. If I scroll down here, I can see ones here with over £10,000 labelled as good. So far, happy with how this is working without having spent all the time with a mistake further up my script and spending a lot of time training an algorithm on nonsense data. So my next part, I'm going to set up my machine learning algorithm. So at this point, I'm going to say I want to classify based on the SIC codes. Now, machine learning isn't great at using text values. So in this point, I'm going to convert those text values to numbers that it can use later on. And then I'm going to use a common machine learning process called logistic regression. So I know this is quite possibly sounding very in-depth technical, but this is stuff that you can get from lots of samples, lots of blogs and everything, and quickly copy and paste this sort of code in. So at this point, this is now setting up my machine learning algorithm. I'm going to put in my data and I'm going to fit it. I'm going to train it based on that training data. And then I'm going to apply the model that it produces to my test data to see what predictions the model makes on the test data, and then I can compare the two. So this is what it produces for the test data set. So if I come across to the end here, I can see for each one, I've got the label that I calculated, whether this was a good account or not. And over here, I've got the prediction, which is what the model says. So I can see that for all these bad accounts, it agrees. So it predicted there was one here that it says is likely to be a good account. And we said it wasn't, so it's got one wrong there. So there's one here that we said was a good account, and it's predicted as a good account as well. So obviously you don't want to be manually reviewing all these. There is a way to get the system to give us a statistical idea of how good this model is based on this testing data. So we can evaluate it based on this area under the curve. So this is basically saying that for 96% of the data that we labeled, it got the same answer. So that's a pretty good model to have got it 96–97% accurate. And we can actually display that graphically like this to say, if you just took a random guess for each one, you would get a line that follows that red dashed line. So as you go through, as you process your data, how many is getting the right answer? And if you're just doing a 50-50 guess, you get a line that goes like that. Our line goes almost straight up. So we are getting almost the entire data set correct. So this is a very good model. So we could then take this further to say, okay, well, let's save that model, and then we could apply it automatically. So as new data comes in, we could apply this model and say, I think based on, we've got the company's house number, we get the SIC code for that. Then from there, we can apply this model, and then we can give the salesperson a very good prediction to say, is this likely to be a good account? And based on that, maybe you could use it to assign it to your key account team or your best salesperson to be able to develop that further. Okay, so with that, I'm going to hand that data back over to Joe to take it through to present through all the way to Power BI.
Thanks, Mark. Okay, so I'll just get my screen shared. Just give me a moment. Okay, so evidently, in terms of the stuff that Mark's shown, it's really great, insightful stuff. But ultimately, for most business users, it's probably going to be quite tricky for them to actually go through and read, Python data and actually do anything useful with that. So we need to try and get this data into a format where hopefully people can consume it a lot easily. So in order to do this, we can return back into our data factory, and we can use our standard pipelines to be able to perform basically just a copy data task. And all we're doing in this one in particular, if we just check on here, is we're taking the CSV files that Mark has output out, and we're just basically just doing a copy of these into a Synapse Analytics database. Because of the volume and the number of records involved here, it's going to make us more sense for us to use Synapse as our database provider on here. It's built for these large-scale warehousing capabilities, and performance-wise, it's going to tick the box as well when we're working with this data. So all we do is we just copy the data into staging tables within Synapse, and execute some stored procedures to be able to get that data into there. So let's take a quick look in terms of how Synapse basically works underneath the hood. So there's two ways in which you can work with Synapse Analytics. You can of course use SQL Server Management Studio. Effectively, what you're connecting to is SQL Server. It looks and feels like a SQL Server, but it isn't actually that behind the scenes. We'll touch upon that in a few moments, but you can basically work with it using SSMS as well. As an alternative these days, we have also got what's called Azure Data Studio. Now, for those of you who may be a bit familiar with working with Visual Studio Code, it's got a very similar feel to it. It can do everything that SSMS can do, but it also supports things like extensions and being able to theme it and stuff like that. So if you're really sort of hooked on a particular VS Code theme, or you like your dark mode, then this could be potentially a good candidate for you. As we can see at the moment, we're connected up to our Synapse Analytics databases, and we've got a few different tables into there. And we can basically dive in and just look at how these scripts are sort of comprised behind the scenes. So as we're looking at this, we can see these are just bog standard Transact SQL statements. There's nothing here which, if you're used to working with SQL Server, you're going to be you're going to be concerned about when you get into it. The only thing that's worth noting that's different is that there's some table options that we must provide for everything that we create out in Synapse Analytics. We must specify our distribution and also the index type that we're using. So in this case, we can see for this particular table, because it's a staging table, we're just using a standard round robin distribution and a heap index on that. We're not too concerned about query performance against this particular table. When we scroll down and look at actually the main table, which is where our reporting is going to surface data from, we're choosing a cluster column store index for this, and we're using hashed distribution based on our company number. So therefore, hopefully when we're doing queries targeting that field specifically, we're going to see a bit of a performance increase. As I mentioned before, Synapse Analytics does look and feel like a SQL Server, but behind the scenes, actually what it's doing, it's storing your data across various different storage accounts behind the scenes, and using sort of scalability behind the scenes to be able to cascade your data out across different sort of locations and geographies, and ultimately allow you to then query and bring that together in an efficient way. So as I say, looks and feels like a SQL Server, but actually underneath the hood, it isn't. It's actually using something that's actually, when you look at the technical detail behind it, it's actually quite interesting. So effectively, this is how it all looks within our data studio. But ultimately, we want to try and get this into a consumable format. So finally, if we just jump across now into Power BI. What we've done in here in this report is that we're just connecting up to our Synapse Analytics endpoints. We're pulling in the tables that we saw earlier, and we just added just a range of different visuals onto the dashboard that we think will be useful in terms of interrogating our data further. So a few interesting insights that we can see from this, we can use, for example, a decomposition tree. The information that Mark showed us earlier in terms of our information technology companies being, particularly quite significant when it comes to revenue, is obviously borne out here when we start to drill into that. And obviously we can sort of tailor about with that and to our sort of heart's content. We can see some interesting stats regarding the location of companies across the UK, or indeed not the UK, as it sort of turns out. So perhaps maybe a couple of non-DOMs, maybe hiding things away in perhaps in non-UK based geographies, perhaps. We won't comment further on that. We can see some interesting stats. Okay, top SIC code, based on the period of data we're looking at, grow cereals and other crops. I don't know about you, but certainly I've been having a lot more Cocoa Pops during lockdown compared to usual, so that might contribute to that. And then other interesting stats as well, we can sort of look into, okay, what's the figures around our information technology, business domestic software, seeing quite a big jump up there, and also dormant companies and other SIC codes. All of this can be ultimately interrogated further, and we can actually drill down and see the various different visuals update based on that. So ultimately, some really interesting insights that we can start to generate, and what we're hopefully have done and have shown you in the demo today is how we can take, what is just at the end of the day just bog standard data that we're actually using day in, day out within our CRM system, and we can actually introduce some really useful insights on top of that. It's all about enriching the data, improving the quality of it, and hopefully in the process we can start to get some additional insights and benefits within the business through using that. Okay, so just return to the slides now. So we've only really focused on a snapshot of what's available in Azure today. There's actually more technologies at our disposal that if we're so inclined, we can actually explore and actually can deal with other different types of scenarios. So as an example on here, you've got tools such as Azure Cosmos DB. So if you need that really globally scalable database service that maybe can handle your structured and non-structured data, whilst also providing that familiarity in terms of having a supported SQL endpoint, then that's really going to be the one for you. There's some really quite interesting capabilities there in Cosmos DB. It's used, when you've got that global reach in the application, you can really start to generate some, some really it can be a really effective application ultimately. You've got tools such as Xbox Live using it and stuff like that, to give you a flavor of that. If you are wedded to your traditional SQL Server database, you just want to work with that all day long, then the good news is we can actually get that in Azure. We can get a fully managed version of that. So if, like me, for example, you just want to have a database, you don't want to have to worry about the server and patching it and installing all the roles and all that stuff around it, then you can basically get that. And it also supports you different flavors of SQL as well across different vendors. So whether it's MySQL, MariaDB, or PostgreSQL, you can get sort of managed versions of those ready for you as well. In situations where you're using IoT devices or need to stream data for real-time analysis, Stream Analytics provides a really great way of being able to do that. In addition, if you're coming from a SQL background, then the language that it uses, the Stream Analytics query language, is a SQL-like language. It hopefully will then help you to speed along when it comes to working with your data, have to learn a completely new language. And then finally, Azure HD Insight, which is sort of similar to Databricks in a lot of ways. Generally best when you're doing this sort of big data analysis, or perhaps you're working with frameworks such as Hadoop, Apache Spark, Apache Kafka, or other ones as well. And really, it's all about giving you that ease of deployment and being able to manage your clusters that you spin up to basically process your data as well. I quite like it because a little elephant on there looks a bit like Dumbo, but hey, what do I know on it? So, as we can see, and both in terms of the stuff that we haven't covered today and also in the demo itself, there's a lot of good stuff here that you can consume, and hopefully somewhere along your journey you'll find something in here which can hopefully meet your requirements and more. So in sort of closing then, what we would probably try and emphasize and sort of promote as part of today's talk is that, okay, well, look, you don't have to necessarily be a super expert at this stuff to actually get started with it. As we saw at the start of the demo, getting Microsoft Dataverse or Dynamics 365 data out into Data Lake is just a case of just following just a wizard and a few steps, and then boom, you're starting to work with your data in Azure. So it's really easy to do. And really, when it comes to extensibility, within the Power Platform, within the business application space, Azure is the go-to place for you to do that. You're going to have that speed in being able to quickly extend things out. As you start to consume and use these services, you can start to hopefully generate some really useful insights from your data. And when you start to enhance it as well with your own bespoke data sources, as we saw in today's demo, there's hopefully some real value that you can start to drive around that. And I think I would also say as well is, when it comes to tools like Data Factory, if you're wanting that really great and modern ETL experience that's got the high throughput of data both into and out of Microsoft Dataverse, then certainly it far exceeds what you would traditionally get through your sort of legacy solutions such as SSIS, or indeed from a vendor solutions as well. So it's certainly worth considering as well. Mark, is there anything you'd like to add there in terms of just final closing remarks?
I just say that all the Azure stuff, it's there is a massive amount out there today, and it's just always moving forwards. So improvements coming sort of month on month on things like Data Factory, getting things like Power Query into there. If you're wanting to do things like importing into Dataverse and doing that through the data flows that are built into Dataverse, and getting those through Power Query in Data Factory as well. If you used to doing things like importing, exporting using Excel in Dataverse at the moment, take a look, because these things are always moving, and there's probably something better out there today which could save you a whole bunch of time. Things like the data Power Query improvements are just multiplying up the speed that can happen in, and you can find some real business benefits by just doing the same things you're doing today, but just having them doing a more modern way, faster way. And then from there, opening up a whole range of other things that may just not have been on the table before. So yeah, just take a look around, see what's there, because there is so much. We can't touch on everything today. And there might well be something out there that just triggers off that little idea of that's the thing that can make the difference in our business.
No, and that's a really good point around the Power Query. You know, it's really embedded in now across both Power Platform and Azure. You know, so you know, not just for the situation where you need to do reporting in Power BI and stuff like that. You can actually get a lot of leverage out of this. So maybe start off with a solution using, let's say, Power Query in the Power Platform via something like Data Flows, but then easily then migrate that across to something that's more robust and enterprise grade. You know, by using Azure Data Factory. So, you know, it's really great to see that, and that obviously we can do that quite easily. Now, we appreciate we've covered a lot in today's demo, and usually sometimes it's actually good to actually just see for yourself in terms of what we've actually shown today. So what we've done is we've taken all of the Azure RM templates, we've taken the SQL code, we've taken this presentation as well, and it's all on GitHub for you. So what you can do is you can download it, you can deploy it out yourself, experiment further, and hopefully use this as a basis for being able to build out your own solution in the future. So all it leaves us to say now is thank you very much for watching this today. We both hope you have a fantastic virtual day at the Scottish Summit. Please do watch out for the other sessions. Find out more about the sponsors of the events, what they're offering and how they can potentially help your business. And do look out for the recording, which we publish shortly after the event. All it leaves us to say today is thank you very much. Cheers.
Thank you.